So we're back with another episode of Biz Mindz, and on today's episode we have Mike Moreiras.
Hello,
Thank-
everybody. How are you?
Good. Thanks, man. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mike is a realtor with Caldwell on Fifth,
Yep.
and he's also a co-partner in MBM Electric
And vice president as well.
and vice president. Well, my first question, Mike, would be: does money buy happiness?
Never.
No.
Never at all.
Tell me a little bit. Share with me a little your thoughts on that.
So, as selling real estate goes, I started young and I sold a lot of real estate very quickly. My first year, I sold about 10 million in the business, and I didn't have time for much. And at the end of the day, I'm in this position where I tell a lot of the people that are new into the business, at the end of the day, money is only good as the people you can enjoy it with. So, all in all, money can't buy happiness, because if you're not happy with yourself first and foremost, right? But also the people that, you're able to have experiences with, and ultimately boiling down to the memories that we make with the money we have is truly, I think, what's most important.
Mm-hmm. And would you say, have you ever bought happiness with money?
I've tried.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Traveling, and other indulgences, of course.
Right. I do agree, though. I think that you should be happy with or without, right?
Absolutely.
And so you're a realtor with Caldwell. When did you start with them?
I started. I got licensed in 2020, and my first sale was 2021, and it was for 1.3 million in Livingston Woods. So it's my first sale ever.
Nice. How did that come about?
Actually, I was cold calling off Zillow, and realistically just connected with this couple who was in this odd predicament that kids were moving out, and ultimately their property was just a bit too much. It was a nice equestrian property, and it was just a lot for them to handle. So they decided to sell it, and I was the one who was able to come in front of them and say, hey, this is the new age of digital marketing, and this is what I can do for you. And they liked what I had to say, and it sold in about 45 days and never looked back.
Mm-hmm.
What's the commission on the 1.3 you said?
Yeah, so that one was a $35,000 check. So, of course, being 22 years old at the time, I'm seeing a $35,000 check. And my first thought is, it's more than some people make in their whole year's salary, And I said, okay, well, if I did one and I have others in the pipeline already, it's something that I'll bet on myself.
Right. How long were you a realtor for until you got that first sale?
8 months before I actually had the listing appointment with them and everything, and got it locked in.
Okay.
And then about another 4 months to the end of the closing. So it took a little while to.
So a year.
About a year, yeah, actually.
For that first sale.
For the closing and the check to come in, about a year. Yep.
Do you think that time of having to, I'm sure there's people that get sales maybe quicker or even later, but do you think, because going a year without a sale and something, I don't think a lot of people last, right?
No. The average is about 20% of the agents are doing about 80% of the business. And everybody says when you get into the real estate business, if you last 5 years, you're going to have a lifetime in this career. But until that 5-year mark, nobody knows what's going to happen with you.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to the ones that get that early commission, like right away? Like
a lot of times, their head gets too big to the where they can't even walk through the door. Essentially, their ego becomes their driving factor, and for some it works, right? But it's not a sustainable business practice, because at the end of the day, when your ego's too involved, I feel like you're not taking care of your clients as much as you should be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have your own, intention behind what you're telling them.
Yeah. Do you focus on a specific range of homes that you sell, like between this number and this number? Like, do you have a niche, or is it?
It's hard to say. Naples has so many price points and so many different opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
The end of the day, as the market has shifted, early in my career, I would tell you yes. Now, as the market has shifted, I'll tell you, I'm not really specific to any price point. I'm specific to people who respect my time and the advice I'm giving them and the reason why they hired me. There was a time I had to fire about 7 clients because, you know, I was telling them you need to reduce your price and this is what the feedback is and this is what's going on a weekly basis, open houses and all that. And, you know, they wouldn't listen to me. And of course, I get it. You know, I'm the young kid in his 20s telling you that your house is, you know, less than you think it is right now. And that's a hard pill to swallow. But, you know, the reality is my marketing money is still being funneled down the drain, trying to push your house, which is an unrealistic price. And it hurt me too. Right. So I had to, you know, say, I don't care what the commission could be because it's never going to sell at this price. And if they're not going to be realistic, it's not worth it for me. Right. So it became more, you know, I'm selective to people who are serious, you know, not really a price point. I have properties that I've sold under 300 and I've had properties that I've sold over 5 million. So it's just a matter of now the people who, you know what they want to a degree and, you know, at least lifestyle wise, and I'm able to pinpoint them to the lifestyle that they want because Naples offers so many.
Right. Right. What truly makes somebody successful in real estate as an agent?
Thick skin, I think, is one of the biggest qualities to have. You know, the biggest thing in real estate, I think, is follow up. There's a lot of business that, you know, people lose or people do get because they are following up or not following up. And I've seen it in my day-to-day business with my own family and friends even that, you know, oh, I'm sorry, you weren't front of mind. And of course, my network is in Miami as well. So I have sold on both sides of Florida throughout my whole career. But, you know, of course, if I'm not front of mind and everything, I'm not going to get the deal. So following up and being present is the most important.
What about connections, relationships? If you go into real estate with a big book of business, are you more likely to succeed?
Yes and no. If you're coming from a previous business, yes, you know, but I think it's really a mindset more than anything of I'm a go-getter. You know, there's agents who I see, as I mentioned, 20% of the agents are doing 80% of the business. Those are the agents that wake up at 6 a.m. They make all their calls they need to. They hit 50 to 100 people regardless of what happens. You know, then there's, you know, the other percentage of agents, and realistically, they treat this as a regular 9 to 5, and they're looking at their team leader or their broker to hand them deals, and then they close it, great, but then they're looking for the next one from the higher up. No, you go get it. You know, and that's really the defining factor in real estate is if you really want to succeed, you go get it for yourself, period.
Right. And right now, are you on a team or are you building a team?
I've never been on a team. I've always been independent, and it's always been a struggle because there's a lot of people who don't understand the digital marketing. So at the end of the day, I'd love to, you know, expand my wings and hire in new agents that are looking to, you know, also be a go-getter. There's a lot of business that I have that I can't get to. However, you know, I'm also not looking to diminish my service that I offer to my clients in order to scale my business. It's, you know, it's I'm comfortable and happy taking care of the clients I have, and until I have the right people that can offer the same services and I'm confident in that, you know, it's not worth it to me.
Right. Right. What are some of the goals? I know you mentioned right now that you're being selective on on growth.
Yes.
But what does growth look like for you, let's say in the next 5-10 years with the real estate side?
You know, long term, I ultimately want to get into development. You know, I have a few properties in mind already that my family owns, and my brother owning an electrical company, it's kind of easy to put people in place that he's used in our GCs and things like that I've built throughout my network to make, you know, bigger plans happen. And then at the end of the day, I don't have to be the cold calling realtor, and I don't have to even worry about bothering anybody because I can just develop and sell my own projects.
And you sold in Miami area.
Yep.
And Naples, so Southwest Florida. What's the biggest difference you see between those? Because it's only 2 hours, right, or so away.
Absolutely.
But what would you say is the difference doing deals in Miami versus Naples?
There's just a lot of turnover in Miami. There's a lot more people, and even though it's a lot more widespread, there's a lot of money on the East Coast. There's nothing to be said about that. Although the main difference is, I always tell everybody who's trying to compare, you have to take all the money from Miami and Fort Lauderdale and compact it into about 10 miles to really put Naples into perspective, because all the money that everybody thinks is in Miami is really here hiding. But Miami, the main thing is everybody's going broke trying to look rich, so the main thing about that market is the turnover is constant. Families are always moving. It is a younger demographic, of course. But, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people buying outside their means just for vanity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think Naples will ever become like Miami?
I hope not. But the reality is, the last 2 years, Miami and Fort Lauderdale has been our biggest buyer pool, and superseding New York and Chicago by about 25%.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the biggest demographic that is coming to Naples in the entire country.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
And you have to put into perspective too, like for my mother, right? She bought her home over there for $120,000. Now it's worth $2 million. She tears it down. She can name her price. But, long and short is, she's lived there 40 years, and now she's phasing to retirement, and she has ultimately made a good living for herself. And there's too much chaos over there. I mean, you have to wake up 30 minutes early and really drive 40 minutes to get 7 miles down the road.
What part of Miami?
So they started in Hialeah, and then ultimately they went to Miami Gardens, and they bounced around. Then Hurricane Andrew happened. My father actually helped rebuild most of Homestead after that. And then a lot of them and their friends went up to Southwest Ranches, and then they built Weston, and my family's in Southwest Ranches at this point. So back in the day, it was horse country. Nobody knew about it, and I was the only kid on the block. Now Tyreek Hill's my neighbor, The Rock's my neighbor, and they're building a neighborhood right next to us. The price point's up to $40 million, and they have a helipad in it. So that's why I said, Mom, $2 million's great, but you could tear this down and name your price. And she said, yeah, you're not wrong.
Right.
So
right. Wow. And how'd you get involved in the electrical business?
So 2.5 years ago or so, my father got sick. My brother tells me one day, hey, you need to come home for help me with a doctor's appointment. So no problem. So I went home, and I realized, wow, like he can't even walk. And I saw him 2 months ago, and he was totally fine. So I stuck by, and I said, okay, I can't really hang out in Southwest Florida at this point because I own my own home here and everything. And I said, I can't really be here. So I kind of put a renter in my house and everything. And I said, we'll figure this out and hope for the best. Well, about a month later, he got diagnosed for ALS, unfortunately. And, ultimately within about 28 days after that, he passed. So, it was a very, very crazy time where life was just very upside down. And throughout that, I was the only one who could take care of him because real estate's very, passive, I should say, but also like hands off. I don't have to be somewhere all the time. So, I got over there. I started taking care of him because my brother needed to operate their day to day. They were finishing one of their last developments. And long story short, I was starting to optimize the invoices and everything online in my spare time. I got a couple listings, and I actually sold them from the couch without even moving. All I did was send the photographer there, gave him a code and everything. And I said, wow, it doesn't have to be so hard. And this was the time that I fired my 7 clients, and I said, it doesn't have to be so hard. And so I ultimately just said, you know what, I'm going to focus on the people that really respect me and my time and throw it back into my family. And, it paid off because my brother said, look, I love this job, but I can't deal with people like you can, and I'd really love to, start putting us back on the map. And I said, not a problem. I'll get in front of the people, I'll handle communications, and, you handle the operations. And, we're a symbiotic, relationship like that. So it became a one day help kind of thing that ended up into now 2.5 years that, it was just one idea that kind of snowballed as it usually does. Yeah. So,
and this was 2 years ago, right?
Yes.
About 2 years ago.
April 9, 2024 is when he passed. So 2
Okay.
years ago at this point, or just about.
Yeah. And then how old were you at that?
I was 26.
26. Okay.
Were you close?
Yes,
Yeah.
very close.
And it was just like a month after, right?
Yeah, just about. Well, I went January. End of February was diagnosis, and then April 9th was he passed. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and yeah, it's obviously sorry.
I appreciate it. You know, ALS is a very terrible disease. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I'm grateful that he didn't suffer for longer than he could have.
Right.
Yeah. Does that give you just a different perspective on life and just business and what you do? And like in the grand scheme of things, it just doesn't seem like it just puts the most important things into a different perspective. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. I mean, from business to personal, it was a whole reworking of my life from the top down. And, you know, I couldn't be, it's a weird way to say it. I'm not going to say I couldn't be more thankful, but couldn't be more thankful, I guess, for the growth that came from the hardship more than anything, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And so your dad created this company, this electrical company, right? He grew it. It's a good sized company. You mentioned around, I want to say 10 or 20.
We have about, fully staffed, we'd have about 10 people. Yep.
About 10 people. Mainly do work in the South Florida area.
South Florida, they're just starting to expand here. I just found a licensed guy here who could be full time on our end, and he's looking to expand his wings as well. And I said, while you get licensed, you help me help you, and we make it work. Because he's a journeyman licensed and working towards master to get his own company.
Okay.
So I said, well, we can pull the permits if you want to work with us for now, and you take it on, we can help you, learn some things and, build your business. So it's kind of, it's all about networking, but they've always done business here, but it wasn't my dad's focal point. Mm-hmm. Because, realistically, it just wasn't something he knew. This was his vacation home. He didn't want to work on vacation. Mm-hmm. So he kept it all over there. But he would go to the Keys, West Palm Beach, and everything. So an hour and a half drive is daily for him. Most of his development was Bal Harbor, Bay Harbor. Mm-hmm. So from Southwest Ranches, that's a good hour any good morning.
Right. Mm-hmm. Do you see more? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted. So who's running the business right now? Is it you or your
myself, my brother, and our mother?
And your mother. Okay. Do you see the difference between running this business with what you do, like real estate?
Yes, I see. I see the biggest difference is, real estate is a lot more. It's a lot easier to delegate. In electrical, if I delegate incorrectly, someone screws up, burns a house down, that's a lot more liability than someone that, forgets to leave a door unlocked in Pelican Bay. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. That, it's a very big difference. And of course, nobody should leave a door unlocked either way, right? But the liability and the worry between the two is definitely a lot more drastic on the electrical side.
Yeah. And so you will say you're 2 years in business or how long in business with the electrical?
So personally, I've been working with MBM for 2 years since my father, right. But it has been operational since 1989. Oh. So my father has been a master contractor since 1989 after coming here from Cuba in the 60s.
Yeah. So in these 2 years, in your perspective, what's more important? Is it systems or sales?
Oh, that's a hard one. I would say systems are the most important because sales will come and go, but unless you have the correct system, you're never going to get all the sales you should. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to you're not going to be as successful as you should be, right? Without the right systems in place.
Yeah. Do you think at some point in the business, sales could be more important than systems? Or do you think systems are always going to, create that big growth for the company?
Don't get me wrong, sales are definitely important. Especially on the electrical side, there's a lot of contractors and people in that service industry who don't understand that sales is a big aspect of it. And so, I noticed it with my brother. There's things that customers will tell us, they have these issues, and he goes, okay, no problem, I'll go to fix it. But then, he doesn't think to say, okay, but I can install your whole home surge protector for an extra couple $100.
Mhm.
And, that helps you prevent this issue from the future.
Yeah.
And so, it's a different type of brain. He is a very creative mind, and he's always loved working with his hands. So before that, he was a fully fledged mechanic.
Mhm.
So rebuilding cars with my father. So, ultimately there's creative brains and then there's the sales brains. And I think, both parts are necessary to have the system working as it should.
Yeah. 100%.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a sales and system. And both are difficult.
Absolutely. And it's a full-time job both ways.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have to delegate, what you're not the best at, and just focus on your strengths, double down on your strengths. And I think ultimately having the right technology behind you really puts that into perspective. As my brother and I, we are that symbiotic relationship. He said, let me handle the projects, you handle the people. Easy enough for me.
Is he older?
Just about 20 months.
20 months older.
So yeah, he's 2 years if we're going to be technical. Yeah.
Okay. So he's 30?
Yes.
30. Got it. Do you see more growth for the electrical company in Miami or Naples?
A lot more growth in Naples.
Really?
The biggest thing in Miami is, there's a lot of people over there who sit at Home Depot and wait for any guy to pick them up for, $50 a job type of things. And, our service gets a little bit muddied down over there because there are all those handyman types and the people that do trust them, unfortunately. And we're always fixing their issues. In Naples, there's been a few instances even this year where a couple of my coworkers have called us and said, hey, I had Mr. Sparky out, or I had so-and-so out. And, they ultimately gave them a quote and they weren't comfortable. They said, can you just look this over? And I said, no problem. And, one specifically that got a quote to replace some coach lights, on the front of your garage. $9,000 is what they came back with. And my colleague said, what is this? Can you look this over? They said, my panel's burned, and they said it needs to be replaced. And I said, something's wrong here, but let me check it out. All in all, they had about an excess of $2,000 worth of stuff that did not need to be done at all. The panel was burned and it needed to be replaced. We did that job. They came here from Southwest Ranches because we're just across US 27. They came here, finished that job for $3,700. So, we significantly shaved off essentially 50, 60% of what, these quotes were, right? Mm-hmm. These people were 75, 80 years old. They didn't know anybody better, right? So if they didn't know to call me, they would have just paid it. Mm-hmm. And, it's this battle that we can't even really safely get $3,500 for a panel on the East Coast, especially permits and all that. There's a lot of time involved, and it's worth it. But, at the end of the day, people battle us and tooth and nail every penny over there.
Right.
And here we're helping people and increasing our margins. I mean, it only makes sense,
right. The Naples market.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There's just so many people out there.
And not enough contractors here that will show up, do the right thing, are licensed and insured, and actually know what they're doing.
Right. Right. And that's probably why the few can jack up prices so high, right? Because there's not as many, like you're saying.
Absolutely.
So what does growth look like for the electrical company? Where do you, like, if it's an ideal growth situation 5 years from now, what does that company look like? Team members, rev, or whatever those goals that you have for that company, what does that look like?
I think honestly, that's more my brother's forte. Mm-hmm. Because I always loved real estate. Real estate's my passion, and it's something that fell into my lap as a convenience that, I realized actually helped me in my real estate business. So I dove into it because, walking through showings with buyers, I would tell them this panel needs to be replaced. And now since I own the company, I can, negotiate better on your behalf and get you a better deal for both. Mm-hmm. So, I kind of use it to my advantage. Where it goes is all up to my brother. At the end of the day, I think He's going to take it and excel it, to, almost a fully statewide operation. As long as we put the right systems in place. So we are solar licensed as well. And that's one of the big things that he's really focusing on a lot, as well as smart home. But it's a big learning curve from high voltage to low voltage, like it is with solar and smart home stuff. So, he's really working hard to learn his low voltage more than anything, because that's really where the transition the biggest transition has been. My father never liked to do it at all. That was telephone lines and doorbells. There was no money in that. So my father said, you don't need that. Now your whole home is a smart home, and that's all low voltage wires that get connected. Yeah, sure, from the main voltage, but for perspective, we built a 8,000 square foot house in Bell Harbor. Our contract was about $350,000, if I remember correctly. The low voltage electricians that came in had $1 million contract just for the same house, just because their breakers are more expensive. They're more finicky, of course, but the wires are more expensive and more finicky. They're thinner. They're a lot harder to work with. So there's a lot of nuances behind scaling it, and I'm not sure which direction he wants to truly hone in on and what's in his heart. But I know he knows residential, commercial, and industrial front, back, and center as far as high voltage goes. Even just built a warehouse for boats. So ultimately, he has done everything to this point, and it's up to him to see, where he wants to take it. But I think he will make it a full state operation, probably in the next 2 to 3 years, as long as we get the right people behind us in place. And it's just about making those connections more than anything.
Yeah. Do you find it difficult to balance both real estate?
At times, yeah. I do. I do have a good follow-up system on both sides, and I have a little bit of it commingled, so I don't, really lose anybody in between. But more than anything, with my mom behind me and my brother, I think it really helps, delegating. We have our group chat, so, we always stay in constant communication saying, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what we do, blah, blah, blah. And we really have a nice, efficient system going right now that it's, I think it's easy to propel from.
Yeah. What's success to you? What makes you feel successful?
What makes me feel successful? Being purposeful to others, being important to others in that sense. What makes me feel successful is when, you really extend yourself in any case. I mean, as business owners, everybody feels that way, that they extend themselves so much for their customers. And, a lot of the times it just kind of falls off, their shoulders, and, you hardly get a thank you in a lot of cases. So I think the people that don't forget to appreciate you is the biggest factor.
Yeah. Do you think the more money you've made is the more people you've helped?
I think you can help people despite a monetary value or monetary gain, and there's a lot of people that, I've used my real estate to help, where people are doing off-market deals. For example, I had my 8th grade teacher. She had to sell a property because her mother died and everything. And we had one meeting about it, and we didn't even take pictures or anything. She walked to Publix, and one guy bumped into her and said, I'll buy your house cash, blind, quick closing, everything. And she said, look, what could you do for me? And any agent would tell you, 6% or 4% max, lowest you could do. And, I said, I operate myself, I don't really talk to anybody. And, it's my 8th grade teacher. I was like, I can't charge her more than $6,000 to sign 10 pieces of paper. That's not right. So, I did. I charged her 1%, and, I got a lot of crap for it on the back end. But, that's something I feel good about, that, ultimately has now paid off, because my deal that closes this next month is her daughter that, she called me about 2 years later. So, a lot of stuff that, it's all about how you treat people, and they're going to give it back to you, I think.
Yeah.
but money does not define everything, and money is just an object. It's a tool. I think money is more like energy.
I agree.
It comes and goes. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't, and it can be gone tomorrow. But at the end of the day, what you do with it, the memories you make, and the lives you impact while you got it, while you're living day to day, that's what matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
And it's always, and I agree with that. I just always think that money topic is just so interesting to me.
I agree.
It's so interesting, because I think that a lot of things, especially here in this country, like I think a lot of things flow, and a lot of things that we want to do, or if you want to, like, let's say you want to hire people, like everything really flows through money, like
Absolutely.
You can't. And the reason why I say this, because like I've worked with a lot of nonprofits, and I see sometimes a nonprofit that will have a great cause, a great mission story behind it, and if the money's not there, it'll close its doors.
Absolutely.
You can't sustain it.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I'm not shaving money off every deal. That's not something I like to do. Yeah. But you're right. Money does grant access. But a lot of people mishandle funds, and I think that's another thing, is what you do with when you have it.
Right.
And really that boils down to who you are at your core, I think.
Right. What's something that, is there anything that you'd like to touch on that we haven't discussed? Anything that you want to share? Advice? Maybe there's somebody that wants to, either they're young, don't know what to do, want to get into real estate, or maybe there's somebody that's in a career that wants to make a pivot and go into real estate. What's some advice that you would give somebody like that?
I would say don't be afraid to pivot at all. I would say just trust yourself. My biggest reflection is when my father got sick. Like I mentioned earlier, the whole consensus of the real estate industry is if you don't last 5 years, then you're not going to have a lifetime in this business. You should just change careers. And I was at year 4. So it was one of those things that I was like, is this really going to be a forever thing and everything? And so, I did have a couple deals here and there, so I didn't give up on it. But, I kind of just focused on myself and my family and what truly mattered. And that's what propelled me forward, and realistically, don't be afraid to pivot, because there was times where, I basically, wasn't outreaching, I wasn't cold calling and everything. And I was just saying, okay, if no business is going to come in, that's fine. I can make a lot more money in electrical anyway. So it's not neither here nor there as far as the money goes. But, my heart, is what real estate is, and the passion I have behind it for helping people. So, don't be afraid to pivot, because everything's always going to work out. It's just a matter of having the confidence that it is going to work out, whatever you decide, and if you feel like you need to pivot because where you're at is not great, then absolutely you need to get out. But if your external environment's telling you that you need to get out and you're feeling pressured to get out, or they're feeling pressured to get out, I would say hone in on yourself, double down on yourself, because it's going to pay off.
Yeah. This is a little bit, so what are your thoughts about people wanting to get into the real estate industry, and because they see somebody online doing good and they think it's an instant success, getting right into that?
So, realistically, I think I hear that every day. All the new agents really want to just jump into this and start making deals happen. I know everybody's got to make their money, but realistically, I'd say real estate is not for everybody unless you want to work, realistically every minute of every day and kind of give up your life to this business in a sense, because you need to wake up every morning getting new information to better serve your clients. You need to go to sleep every day getting better information to better serve your clients. And every minute in between, you need to be learning and making those new connections to better serve your clients.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a constant commitment to doing better for the people that you work for.
Yeah. Between you and your brother, do you guys ever talk about what's harder? Owning and running a business that you started, let's say, from zero. If you need a system, you have to create it, or being in real estate where, real estate, obviously, for the most part, agents aren't building the product, right? They're kind of in the middle.
Absolutely.
And then if you're with the big brokerage, then there is a lot of systems already in place. Do you and your brother ever talk about that? Like,
absolutely. Yeah. There was a couple times I was doing deals on ladders or hands in a panel, changing them, helping him, and ultimately, he would say, "I could never do what you do." It's tough. It really is, and I think it's like I said, it's not for everybody, and ultimately, my brother always says it's impossible that I'm doing both things. Like he's like, it's incredible to see what you're doing. But ultimately I could never do it because it takes a special person to be able to get beat up by these people. So he says, verbally at least, so it's like, thick skin, as I'm going back to that, it's biggest trait to have, because you have to take no a million times to get the yes.
Right.
And the electrical side, I don't even have to take a no. They're begging me to get over there.
Right.
So that's really where, I find that easy.
Yeah.
And, it's just, it's a great opportunity to have. And I couldn't be more blessed because I grew up on job sites.
Right.
And that helped me be better at real estate. And I didn't even realize it, that I was growing up and spiteful of my father, making me lose my summers to help him be a little lackey. But, I'm more grateful than anything now.
That helped you a lot in real estate.
Oh, yeah,
because
for
my
sure.
brain just automatically understood it, the whole development process. And so, when, I saw things in houses, I would say this is wrong, or, I just had this natural ability because it was almost ingrained into me.
Was your dad a GC?
No, he just worked with his best friend who was a GC for about 40 years. So they did every bank and residential house in Bal Harbor Village since the 90s. So
wow.
Yeah. So he was a very large developer out there, and not developer, but his team was a very large development team out there. So it's one of those things that he continued to build, and to this day we still use that GC. And
really?
With our last project was actually the most expensive non-waterfront home ever sold in Bay Harbor Islands.
Oh, really?
For 12.6. Yeah. 9,700 square feet.
Electric is a great industry. Great. Just like AC.
And plumbing.
Yeah.
The big
and
three.
Plumbing, yeah. Those
big three.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody wants to do them, but honestly, the next 10 years, I think all the millionaires are going to be made in those three industries.
Yeah.
Service.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's those are industries that you can do a lot on the automation, the AI side, but you just can't replace the actual people that are going in and doing the service.
Absolutely.
Right. Cold calling, sales, that keeps getting better and better and better with agents.
Yep.
Like AI agents. So you can definitely, or even what's it called? Like front desk, busy work. I feel like those are things that can quickly get replaced and probably will get replaced. But yeah, those three things: HVAC,
so much
plumbing,
demand,
electrical.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of opportunity there.
100%. I mean, anything in service, even cars. If you do mechanics or even mobile detailing. I mean, it's just about being a go-getter, and Naples specifically is the land of opportunity for any business owner, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think the trickiest thing is always the scale part.
Yes.
Right? Because
Absolutely.
you can always be very busy as a one-man show, right? Usually everybody that gets into these things, they're busy, but really what's the scope of you being that busy, because it's only one individual wearing a million hats. So,
right.
So I think in scale is where it gets tricky, but if you can scale, then the there's no ceiling to it.
And biggest learning curve as a business owner is learning to delegate, I think,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
giving up that power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, look, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It was awesome talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a really wonderful time.
Yeah, of course. We got to do a part 2 eventually.
Yeah, definitely. We'll plan for it.
All right,
It
man.
was great meeting you.
Thank
Great
you.
meeting you as well.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.